Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is Victor Shi, and it is Tuesday, May 16th. More than ever before, journalists play a crucial role in not only reporting the facts and the truth, but also protecting democracy. But this comes at a time when there is a huge distrust in the media, and the attacks on many journalists and the media companies who politicians may not agree with are increasing. Against this backdrop, how should journalists respond? How should journalists cover politics, especially heading into 2024? And what is the role of the press in a society in which so many people seem untethered to truth? I am joined by the perfect guest to discuss this, someone who is a legendary journalist, and she is Judy Woodruff. Previously, Judy was the host of NewsHour on PBS, and since leaving that position, she has remained with the network as a senior correspondent. Judy, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Victor, great to see you and delighted to join you on your wonderful program. You and I have been talking about this for a long time. I'm glad we're finally able to have this conversation.
I know. The last time we talked, I remember it was in DC over the summer, and you told me that you were transitioning from being an anchor at PBS to a senior correspondent. And I'm wondering, I mean, it's been almost, I guess, a full year since I saw you. You're now a senior correspondent. Tell us how that position's been so far and how it's different from being a news anchor.
Well, I did stop anchoring. I said goodbye on December 30th, 2022, after 11 years of anchoring off and on, but for the last 6 years as solo anchor. So a big change in my life, but very much still connected with the NewsHour. And by the way, the NewsHour is now anchored by two remarkable journalists, Amna Nawaz and Jeff Bennett. They're doing a fantastic job, and I hope everybody watching and listening will watch the NewsHour with Jeff and Amna. But what I'm doing now is, as you say, senior correspondent, and I've undertaken a project for this year and 2024. We're calling it Judy Woodruff Presents America at a Crossroads, trying to understand how the country, why the country is so divided, what the American people think about it. I'm traveling around the country trying to get to as many different places as I can, interviewing ordinary folks in communities of all sizes, rural, suburbs and cities, small towns, but also talking to scholars and people who've written and thought a lot about this. And it turns out there's been a lot of thought already given to this.
I mean, that is fascinating. What are some of the states that you've kind of visited, and what does it look like on the ground when you're talking to voters about this moment that we're in? What are people saying?
Well, we started here in Washington because there are some folks, some scholars at Johns Hopkins University based in Baltimore, on the East Coast, folks up in Boston and other places who've written books. But we've already interviewed folks in California. We've been to Wisconsin, to Oklahoma, the state where I was born. We've done a couple of pieces. In fact, tomorrow night on Wednesday, May the 17th, the NewsHour will air the next in our series of reports. They're airing, by the way, every other Wednesday night on the NewsHour. But tomorrow night, we're looking at Tulsa, Oklahoma, and its history, frankly, around the race massacre of 1921. Tulsa, it wasn't taught over the years. I never heard about it as a child. Growing up there, only lived there 5 years, but none of my family knew about it. So many people in the community today didn't hear about it. But looking at where Tulsa is today, how it's dealing with its racial divisions, and it's made a lot of progress. A lot of interesting things have happened, but it still has some hurdles to overcome. And so we're looking at that. But we have plans to go to all, as we said a minute ago, to virtually every part of America. To see what's going on.
That is incredible. And I want to talk more about the role of journalists, especially heading into 2024, because there's been a lot of criticism last week after CNN's town hall with Donald Trump. And I'm wondering, kind of when you look at this moment in 2024 and all of the kind of polarization and what's happening with Republicans on the right and kind of their continued spewing of election lies, I'm wondering how you think journalists should be thinking about covering Trump and other right-wing candidates based off of what happened in 2016 and 2020. What is the right approach in this kind of moment in our democracy?
Well, the NewsHour approach, and this is the PBS approach that I learned originally from Jim Lehrer and Robin McNeil, 40 years ago when I first joined the NewsHour back in 1983 after working at NBC. The approach is, frankly, it's one of respect. It's listen to all sides, give people a chance to explain where they're coming from, what their views are, why they think the way they do, how they think. and then to challenge them if they're in a position of authority, if there's someone who is in a position to change law, change the way people lead their lives, then they need to be held accountable. And so whether they're in politics or business or some other line of work in healthcare, we need to be asking them questions about what they believe. But my approach and what I believe all journalists should adhere to is one of respect. I think when we start assuming that the people we're talking to are not smart, don't know everything, are completely off base, it changes our role. And so it's not to say that we shouldn't correct public officials when they make statements that are blatantly false. That is our role as journalists, however we do that. But it is also, what I want the NewsHour always to be is a place where people can come to hear all sides. I know that's not easy, and I don't believe in letting false information and lies go unchecked. It is our responsibility to call those things out, but still to understand that people do have different views. People, as we know, Americans today have different views from one end of the spectrum to the other. And so I think it's appropriate for us to listen, to ask them how they think, why they think, to correct the record if something is stated that's, as I say, blatantly false or a lie, but not to treat people by name calling or putting them in a category where they are less than everybody else because of their views.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I'm wondering, specifically about Donald Trump. Last week, what we saw with CNN, I think to me was kind of, there were a lot of concerning elements, but I'm still convinced, like you said, we should give people a chance to explain themselves and to make it clear to the American people what they think. But at the same time, I'm wondering how you kind of balance that line between giving Trump that ability to warn the American public kind of what he stands for, what his presidency would look like, but also not giving him a platform to endlessly kind of spew lies and take over the narrative. How do you kind of balance that line? Because I think it's really tough, and I haven't seen any answers out there.
Well, I think we're all wrestling with this right now. I think what we've learned, not just from that CNN town hall, but from so many other events, is that it's not a good idea to give individuals, whether it's former President Trump or anyone else who is making just a steady stream of statements that are not borne out by fact or that are invective, labeling people, insulting people, that those individuals don't deserve a live platform of their own and be allowed to go unchecked. It was the case that correspondent Caitlin Collins did try to correct the record throughout the interview. But in that setting, with such a frankly forceful personality as former President Trump, it's very hard to do that. And so I think what we should do in these situations, rather than give someone an unchecked live platform, is that you tape these things ahead of time, you record them, and then you make time to set the record straight, frankly, that you don't let lies go unchecked, false statements go unchecked. And that takes more work. It may not be quite as exciting as seeing it live in person, but I think that's what we have to do. I think it will be different, though, when it comes to debates, because when it comes to debates, whether it's Democratic or Republican primary debates leading up to the general election, I think then it's up to the other candidates to call individuals out. That's what these debates are all about. If former President Trump is on a stage with 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 other Republicans, it's up to them to do this. And the journalists can ask tough questions depending on what the format is. They should be asking appropriate questions. But in that instance, I do think that it's up to the other candidates to stand up and to say what is, in their view, is accurate. And if that means calling out of former President Trump or anybody else, that's what they should do. But I do see the debates in a different category from a straight one-on-one interview.
Definitely. But I also hope that for debates, based off of what happened in 2020, maybe there can be some additional mechanisms in place to make sure that someone like Trump, who has a tendency to go on and on and on. Maybe his mic can get shut off after a minute or a minute and a half. But I think we saw that happen in 2020, and it was a bit of a kind of ramble from Trump's part. But I think there's a lot to be thought about debates, and I agree with you. It's probably a better format than town halls for hopefully truth to come out and for the American public to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the format needs to work in those situations so that one candidate can't just run away for a long time and just mow down everybody else. You can't allow that to happen.
Yeah. The one last thing I want to talk to you about, and this is something I know we've talked about before, is just kind of how fragmented our media system is. You mentioned, when you first started at the NewsHour 40 years ago, and something that I talk a lot about with the co-host of my other podcast, Joe Wine-Banks, is just the differences between that era in terms of facts and networks actually agreeing on the facts, but maybe disagreeing on kind of the policy outcomes, but at least agreeing on the facts. But now it seems like we're living in such a kind of polarized and kind of echo chamber-ish ecosystem. And I'm wondering kind of how you think kind of you get the facts out there at this point, and kind of if you think the Fox and the right-wing audience are even receptive to that at this point. But how should kind of journalists be thinking about their moment given kind of our current ecosystem?
Well, I cannot speak for Fox, or frankly, I can't speak for any other news organization aside from the NewsHour where I've worked.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that all of us as reporters and journalists need to be very, very focused now more than ever on gathering the facts, gathering information, doing the research, doing the work, the hard work that it takes to gather the real information about what's going on, whatever the story is, whether it's immigration or an LGBTQ issue, whether it's education, whether it's the environment, whatever it is, gather the facts and share them.
Yeah.
That in the end, to me, is what will out. And that means that that's going to mean standing up sometimes to folks who insist otherwise. But I think in the end, if we get it right, and we apologize when we get it wrong, and by the way, we're human, we make mistakes, and we should own up to that when it happens. But if we are steadily a place, and I'm talking about the NewsHour now, but this could apply to any news organization. If you are a place that the public learns they can get information that is accurate, that is as fair as we can possibly make it, never going to be perfectly objective, but as fair as we can make it, we will regain the public's trust. But I don't underestimate how hard that is. A lot of damage has been done. So many insults have been thrown on the media. And frankly, a lot of media have earned for themselves a bad reputation because they've chosen to go the advocacy direction, the opinion bias direction, rather than reporting the news. And that's who they want to be. But I don't want the public to confuse that with genuine reporting, which is what I think the country has to have in order to stay a strong democracy.
I'm not sure if you saw this, but right after the town hall on Tuesday, Chris Licht, the CEO of CNN, did this, I guess, CNN-wide phone call, and he basically said, Caitlin Collins did such a great job. She made the news, and a lot of people kind of criticized that comment because it's not up to news organizations to make the news. It's up to news organizations to report the news and to analyze the news and to give viewers not their opinion, but to just report the news and the facts. And so the word you just mentioned, reporting, I think is so important, and one that I don't know if you think maybe news organizations have gone astray from and they want to make the news now, but that's a little bit concerning, I feel.
Yeah, I didn't see that comment by Chris Licht. I wasn't aware of that, but I do believe that it's not our job to be the news. I'm glad to do this interview with you as a reporter, but I always view myself as somebody who is a reporter first and foremost. And that means whatever I think stays out of what I do. It doesn't mean, again, I don't think it's possible to be objective. We're not machines. I'm not a computer. I have opinions, but it's not my job to push those forward when I'm in my role as a reporter, which is what I love doing and what I feel so grateful to have done for my whole career.
Yeah, I know a lot of reporters look up to you, and especially my generation and young reporters who are thinking about going to the industry. I'm wondering what advice you have for those young journalists or anyone who's thinking about going into journalism, and maybe what advice you would give them that you wish you had known when you first started.
Well, in terms of what advice I would give, I would say jump in. The water is fine. It may look chaotic right now, and news media are clearly going through a moment of a time of transition right now. Technology has sped up everything we do, but we need smart young people who are curious, who are willing to work long hours, really long hours, in order to get their work done. It's all about serving the American people. And if that's what you want to do, if you want to inform the public, and if you don't necessarily feel like you're coming into this with a point of view, I mean, I think that's what makes for a great reporting, not feeling that you need to push one side or another side. If you want to do that, then please go into the opinion writing business. Become a columnist from the get-go. But to be a reporter, you've got to be open to all points of view and not go into a story with your mind already made up. And I guess the only advice that I wish somebody had shared with me in the beginning was just be sure, in terms of thinking about your personal life, family life, that you do need to carve time out for that. Journalism can be all consuming. It can just suck up all the time in the day, all the energy that you have. And you need to save some time for your family, for your loved ones, for your close friends. It's just really easy as a journalist to just find yourself doing nothing but working. And we need to be human at the same time.
It's exhausting, but we need to find that balance. Judy Woodruff, thank you so much for coming on this morning, and thank you for all that you're doing. And we look forward to seeing more of your segments on PBS. You said it's every other Wednesday, correct?
Every other Wednesday night on the News Hour.
Sounds great. Judy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor. Great to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, Judy is always amazing, and she's just one of those reporters that has really kind of lived throughout the moment kind of we're in democracy. I mean, she's started 40 years ago as a reporter, made her way up from local journalism all the way up to PBS and other national outlets, and she's just someone who embodies, I think, what it means to really be a journalist, reporting the news, going out in the field, talking to people, asking hard-hitting questions. She is, I think, a model for journalists, for young journalists, and so I hope you all enjoyed that episode. Again, watch her segments every other Wednesday. Tomorrow will be another installation. She said it'll be about Tulsa, which is such an important topic, something that I wish I had learned about in school, but Tulsa will be tomorrow. And then every other Wednesday from there, she'll do a segment about kind of America, reporting in America. And I know it'll be great. So, I look forward to watching that. And hopefully all of you are going to watch that too. But Judy Woodruff is always phenomenal. And I think for especially this moment, we could use more journalists like her who just do the hard-hitting questions, report the facts, give the audience the facts and the truth that they deserve. And that is kind of where we are now. There's not much news, just a couple of things before I guess I let you all go. First, of course, there's some news out of Florida now. Yesterday, Ron DeSantis signed a bill that both the House and the Senate passed that would basically ban every single diversity, equity, and inclusion program from public colleges and universities. Basically, what that means is if a college or a university wants to spend money on DEI programs, they cannot after Ron DeSantis has just signed this bill. And it's just, to me, I mean, you look at kind of what's happening in Florida and this pattern of going after things like DEI and critical race theory and these kind of, I don't know, like meaningless terms, but things that really people don't really kind of care about. I mean, these are things that would just benefit people. These aren't life or death issues, but Ron DeSantis is treating them like life or death issues. He's really making such a big deal out of these. And it's targeting young people because you think about Gen Z and our culture. Gen Z is the most diverse generation in America, whether it be racially, socioeconomically, sexually. I mean, this is a really diverse generation. And so it seems like it's targeting students. It seems like it's targeting students' ability to kind of thrive and prosper on campus. And to me, it's kind of confusing to kind of see what Ron DeSantis is doing, but it's just trying to take our country down a road that I don't think any of us want to go down, and targeting colleges and universities and what we can learn in the classroom. These are things that I think anyone who is a young person, anyone who has a young person in their life, anyone who has children, you should all be concerned about what's happening in Florida. And it seems like Ron DeSantis is ramping up for a presidential election run very soon. And these are the type of things that he would do as president. And so that's scary. And that's something that we should all have alarm bells ringing in our heads about what that reality would look like in 2024. But that's all I have for you today. We'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of On the Move with myself. I'll be joined by the wonderful John Fugelsang, who is a comedian, a commentator, does really amazing work, and just kind of puts our moment into humor, which I think we could all use more of, and we can all use a little bit of a laugh. So John Fugelsang will join me tomorrow morning. Thursday, we will be off. There will be no episode of On the Move, but on Friday, we'll be back with Decoding Fox News. We'll talk about Fox News, kind of how they're able to manipulate their audience and get into their audience's mind, and how maybe we can counter that narrative and maybe hopefully get the truth to them, if that's even possible. So we'll be joined by the account Decoding Fox News on Twitter to talk about all of that. It'll be a fun and exciting episode, I'm sure. So join us tomorrow and Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. And be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And thank you everyone for watching this episode with Judy Woodruff. And I will see you all tomorrow.